Hello and welcome back. And in this video, we are going to be talking about AsyncImage introduced in SwiftUI 3. So WWDC 21 introduced a new view called AsyncImage for SwiftUI. Like the name suggests, this view is responsible for loading images asynchronously and displaying them once they are finished loading. In this video, we will take a look at AsyncImage from its definition to the practical use, and we're gonna apply several different use cases. AsyncImage can load images from local resources or from an external resource, but mostly you're gonna find yourself using this view to load network-based images from an API. That means from the external resources. So let's take a look at its initializer first. So I'm gonna simply call AsyncImage, and we're gonna jump to the definition for AsyncImage. All right. So as you can see, AsyncImage expects a URL, and it has a scale parameter, which has a default value of 1. So URL essentially represents the URL that points to the image, and the scale is basically the scale of source image. Now this parameter, as you can see, has a default value of 1, but you can modify this value of your choice depending upon your device's scale. Now once we have looked at its initializer, let's go back and let's put together a simple example from this init. And for our example, what we're going to do is we're going to use a free API endpoint from Unsplash, which returns a random image from its collection of images. Okay, so the URL that we're going to use is going to be this one. So https:/source.unsplash.com/random. Okay, so this is going to be the URL that we're going to be using. Okay, and what we're going to do is inside our body we already have our async image. All right, and we're going to create a new URL object by supplying the string. This string is going to be basically this image, this URL right here. All right, and with that we will now be able to load this image into our view. So let's go ahead and run this to see it in the action, if we are able to load the image or not. So as you saw, there was for a brief moment there was a gray background that was placed in the view, and then the image, when it was loaded, it was replaced with the background. So while the image is being loaded, SwiftUI displays a gray color placeholder. Now this placeholder is a view that takes as much space as it can and as much space as it has offered by its parent view. Now, reason for this behavior is because the image size is not known until it's loaded. Once the image is loaded, its size is known and the view adjusts to the size accordingly. Now at this point, we are getting full size of image, which can be of any resolution. Random API from Unsplash, it offers a way to request size version for the image that will modify basically the size of the image, and it'll give us what we are requesting. So let's go ahead and modify our example to request a smaller version of the image. Okay, so we're gonna go into our URL and we're gonna say we need 200 by 200 size of image. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Now note that for a brief moment when our view was loaded, our placeholder was still taking entire screen except the safe area. But when the image was loaded, it was loaded with that size because that was the size that was returned by the API. Now we can solve this problem of displaying the background or the placeholder view only to the area where image is going to be shown by applying a frame. And we're gonna stick to 200 by 200 just to match the size that we are actually requesting. If you go ahead and run this, you're gonna see that gray area, now the placeholder, is limited to the space where image is eventually gonna replace that. Okay, so setting the frame does work, but it would only resize the container. It would not resize the image. So if our image is too big, then it can be drawn outside of the bounds. So to change the size of our image, we will have to use another initializer of AsyncImage, which will give us image in the completion, so we can adjust its size, aspect ratio, and all the other values. So we will basically be able to even define our own placeholder view. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at another signature for AsyncImage. So I'm going to go into the definition, and the signature that we are looking for has scale, content, and a placeholder view. So there is a URL just like before, there is a scale just like before. Now there are two new parameters that have been added. One is content, which is of type view builder. This is going to give us an access to the image. And there's another that's placeholder, again a view builder, which is just an empty closure. Okay, it returns the view itself. Okay, as you can see, P is anything that conforms to the view, and I is also anything that conforms to the view. Okay, so once again, we have two new parameters. Content is a view builder closure that will provide the image in the view when the image is loaded, and the placeholder is again a view builder closure that provides the view to show while image is being loaded. It's not loaded yet, but it's being loaded. Okay, so we can go back into our example, and I'm gonna keep this, and we will add, we also remove this. Okay, and we will add content. Okay, and content is a closure, and then we're gonna have a placeholder, which is again gonna be a closure. So let's go ahead and put the content together first, and then we're gonna come back and put the placeholder in place. So content gives us access to the image, so we're gonna say image in, and then we can actually operate on this image, so we can make this image resizable, and all the other usual modifiers that you can apply on the image, you can use those. We're going to use aspect ratio. Okay, and we're going to set the aspect ratio content mode to be fit. We're going to set the frame, and we will set max width and max height. To 200. Okay, that will give us our image, and for the placeholder view, we are simply going to show a progress view. Like so. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, and what we should see is a progress view for a brief moment, and then our image. All right, so AsyncImage itself comes with various different phases. Okay, and this is called AsyncImage phase. So if you need more control over various loading phases for the image, then we can use another initializer that includes AsyncImage phase. Now, initializer with AsyncImage phase gives you more control over the views and let you take action when images yet to load, loaded, or fail to load. An init signature looks something like, let's go ahead and take a look. So I'm going to try to jump into definition, and image's signature looks something like this. Okay, so once again, you have your URL, you have your scale. Now there are new parameters that have been added here. Transaction is basically a parameter that tracks the phases as they change. The content is not giving you an image now, but it's actually giving you async image phase along with content that is going to return, that closure is going to return. So basically it's a view builder closure that provides the view for each phase of loading process, and the closure receives async image phase. And async image phase is basically an enum. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look if we can go into the definition further. Okay, let's see if we can try to go. Okay, so async image phase basically is an enum, okay, like we discussed, and it has a few cases. It has an empty. So when the image is empty, let me see if I can open the documentation here. There we go. Okay, so there's an empty phase when no image is loaded. There is a success phase that actually gives us access to the image when the image is successfully loaded. So there's no image, then you have like successfully loaded image, and a failure case that gives us an access to the error, but it also gives us the opportunity to basically display what we want to display when error occurs while loading the image. So we will go back and modify our async image view a bit to move the URL into a variable first, and at the same time we will also create a transaction variable. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to create a URL, and this is going to represent this URL. And we're also going to create a transaction. This transaction is going to be a transaction object, which will take animation. Now animation gives us an opportunity to animate the transaction through. So we're gonna say we can apply animation.ease_in with a duration of 5 seconds. All right, and we are going to change this. So let me rewrite this. So we're gonna say async image. We're gonna take the overload that takes URL, scale, transaction, and it has a content. For the URL, we're going to supply the URL that we have, the variable that we have created here. For the scale, we're going to set it to 1.0. Transaction, we're going to pass the transaction that we have created. And for the content, we're going to receive a phase. Okay, so we're going to receive image phase. All right, and with the image phase available to us, we can simply put a switch statement in this. And for each phase, we can display something. So we want to show a progress view when the image is not loaded. That means we are in the empty phase. When we have success, we get access to the image. So we want to take that image, we want to resize that, we're going to set the aspect ratio, we're going to set the frame, And for the failure case, we get the error. And what we're going to do is we're going to display a B stack with text. And this text is going to have failed to load image. And underneath, we're going to have another text, which is basically going to display the error. All right. For unknown case, we're going to fall back on the default with an empty view. All right. Now, switch statement basically gives us access to various different download phases. So let's go ahead and build and see how our image looks like now. So we have our image loading over time with 5 seconds. Okay, so once again, let's go ahead and do it again. So you're going to see the progress view, and slowly we're going to ease in our image, and our image is now fully displayed. Okay, now let's add a bit of a delay to the URL so we can appreciate the progress view a little bit more. Okay, so to emulate the delay, there is an API that we can use. It's called delay.me. So the way API goes is like this. You have https://delay, so DEELAY.me. Then it takes delay in milliseconds. So we're gonna say we wanna wait for 2 seconds. Let's wait for 5 seconds maybe. Okay, and then goes the URL that you wanna load after you've caused the delay in that API response. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. And what we should see for 5 seconds, our progress view, and then our image is gonna slowly load. All right, so that was awesome. Like, who doesn't love to wait and stare at the progress bar while we are loading the image? Well, that's probably us. Okay, let's explore the error scenario now. To emulate error case, we will introduce additional S into the URL. Okay, so our URL is source.unsplash.com. I'm going to change this to sources. Now, there is no such URL exists that has sources in it because it's source.unsplash.com. Okay, so this URL is gonna fail after 5 seconds. So let's take a look at our error case, because this is actually gonna help us look at our error case. So we're gonna wait for 5 seconds and stare at our progress bar, and there we go. We have our failed case loaded. Okay, so that's something that you can do, or you can apply to your failed case. I mean, you can actually do something else very well, but this is a way, right? Now you must be wondering, how does AsyncImage looks like in list? So let's go ahead and do something to show these in the list. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to create a sample model. I'm gonna make it identifiable. Gonna have an ID, which is gonna be UID. Gonna have a URL, okay, and that URL is gonna be this guy right here. We're gonna reduce the delay to basically let's add a delay, random delay. So what we're gonna do is gonna use string interpolation to call int.random in close range of 200 milliseconds delay to 5000 milliseconds delay. So like 0.2 second to 5 second is the delay that we are trying to introduce. Okay, All right, and we are also gonna have the name. So name is gonna be, we're just gonna say image. This is just some fictitious name. Int dot random. We're just gonna give this image some name. So the name would be something between 100 to 5,000. Okay. Now that's our model. In the extension for simple sample model, we're going to create a static variable. This is going to be our sample data, and this is simply going to return our simple sample model. Okay, this is just going to be an array of that. I'm going to initialize that. I'm going to go, okay, this is a variable, so I'm going to say var d is equal to simple sample model, okay, for underscore n 0 to 10. Okay, yeah, 0 to 10, and we're gonna display date d dot append a new sample simple sample model that we have created. Okay, and at the end we're gonna return this d. So essentially what we are doing is we have a model, some model that we have created. We have an extension that's actually providing us sample data, and I'm simply creating a for loop between 0 to 10, and we are just generating a new data for this guy. Okay, so this is gonna get us 10 lines of basically this image, a random image, and we're gonna use this to populate our list. Okay, so let's go ahead and write this for our image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be data simple sample model dot data. Okay, we're going to get the data from there. Now we're not going to need any of this, so I'm just gonna cut this, and we're gonna say we need a list, and inside the list we need a for each that's gonna iterate over data. It's gonna give us access to each item in our data, and we need to basically display an image. So let's put a text first. So it's gonna be item.name. Let's make it lazy hstack. Okay. And we need some way to get the async image. So instead of putting all the async image code here, I'm going to put that inside a private function. Get async image for URL. This is going to return some view. Okay. Here we're gonna basically have our async image, the version that takes URL. So URL is being passed to us. We're gonna use that. We're gonna have a scale of 1. For transaction, we're gonna simply say transaction. Ease in with duration of 2 seconds and image face. We're gonna have our progress view. We're gonna have max width of 200 and max width of 200, max height of 200. Okay. And then we're gonna have a case for failure. Okay. Right. We're just gonna replace this with, I would say, underscore, like that. Okay. And for the unknown case, we're gonna simply have an empty view. All right. So we're gonna use this. So get image for URL, and URL is gonna be passed from item.url. Okay. With that, we are ready to execute our code, build and run. Now in this view, we have a data variable, and this data variable is basically storing our sample image. And as you can see, all of our image loads have failed. Let's take a look at why. Because we have this extra s that I forgot to remove. So let me go ahead and rerun this. And what we should expect to see is sometimes the images are going to load, and sometimes they're going to fail to load because there are too many requests. All right, but as you can see, there was an animation that actually was applied while loading the asynchronous images, and our async image basically shows all the different cases. It not only shows the image, it also shows when it failed, and it shows, like, our progress view as well. Like, when the image load starts, it basically shows our progress view and then starts to load all the images. Okay. All right, so with that, we have reached the end of this video. Hopefully you enjoyed the exploration on async image in this video. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in another video. Thank you.